Marcus Webb was 40. 1 year old when his wife went to drain the joint savings account and found $312. She had spent 8 months building toward that moment. 8 months of careful planning, of messages she believed she had deleted, of a man she had decided was an upgrade, who made promises in restaurants she covered with a card linked to Marcus's direct deposit. She had watched his travel calendar for the right window, mapped the transfer down to the hour, and targeted $287,400 they had built together over 12 years. The Thursday she had chosen, Marcus would be 3 states away in Memphis. She had told the man she was leaving with, "Men like Marcus are too honest to imagine anyone else isn't." The entire plan rested on that calculation. For 13 years, Marcus had put everything into that account. He had built the back addition to their house himself, laid the floors on his hands and knees, poured the concrete for the patio with a level and a rented machine across 3 August weekends. He drove a 2016 Ford F-250 with a cracked passenger side mirror he had never gotten around to fixing. He brought home exactly what he said he earned, and never opened a line of credit without telling her first. Her friends called him Steady Marcus, and she never corrected them. What she didn't know was that Marcus had moved every single dollar 11 days before she went looking for it. $312. That was all that remained of 13 years, sitting in the account like a receipt for something already gone. What she set in motion that Thursday morning would cost Renee everything she had spent 8 months reaching for. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The alarm went off at 5:12 a.m. Marcus reached across and silenced it before the second ring, a habit built over 20 years of early job sites. He lay still for 4 seconds, not asleep, not fully awake, listening to the house settle around him. The forced air had kicked on at some point in the night, and the room was 67 degrees, exactly the temperature he kept it. He had installed the thermostat himself, replaced the old unit 3 winters ago, on a Sunday morning, when the contractor they called quoted $800 for a $40 part and 2 hours of work. He was out of bed by 5:15. The kitchen was dark when he came downstairs, except for the light above the stove that was always on. Neither of them ever turned it off. He filled his thermos with coffee from the pot he had prepared the night before, black, no sugar, and screwed the lid down tight. He took his Carhartt jacket from the hook beside the door, the one with his name embroidered on the left chest in thread that had not worn through in 3 winters of daily use. His mother had given it to him. He patted the inside left pocket for his site notebook and found it where it always was. He pulled out of the driveway at 5:24 a.m. In his F-250 charcoal gray, the cracked passenger side mirror catching the glow of the street lamp in the diagonal line he had stopped noticing 2 years back. The crack ran corner to corner across the glass, the result of a rebar miscount on a site in February that had caught the door while he was climbing down from the cab. He had priced the replacement part at the time, $63, 2 hours of his time. He kept meaning to get to it. He always found something else worth doing first. Marcus Webb was a structural engineer, 16 years into the work, the last 9 at Thornbridge Civil Group, where he held the title of Senior Project Lead. The title had come with a modest salary adjustment and a key to a supply room he had never opened. He did not care about the title. He cared about the work. The project he was heading that fall was a pedestrian bridge replacement in Kelton, 22 miles north. The original structure dated to 1971 and had passed every inspection until it hadn't. Marcus had reviewed the preliminary assessment in July. agreed to lead in August, and by September had already found 2 problems the original inspection team had misclassified. One was a bearing plate alignment issue on the eastern pylon, documented as within tolerance. It was not within tolerance. It was 2 millimeters outside, and it had been that way for at least 6 years based on the oxidation pattern Marcus photographed on a Thursday afternoon while standing in the creek bed below the structure. In rubber boots, shooting angles that no one else had thought to try. He had written the finding into a 14-page addendum and placed it in the project file without mentioning it at the next morning meeting. The lead inspector found it 4 days later and called. The call lasted 11 minutes. At the end of it, the inspector asked how Marcus had caught the discrepancy from that angle. Marcus said, "I went down into the water." That was all he said. He had always been that way. Thorough not in the manner of excessive caution, but in the manner of a man who understood that 2 millimeters unaddressed becomes a failure no one can explain. He moved through problems the way he moved through job sites, steadily, completely, without announcing himself. He was home by 6:15 on the Tuesday evenings he did not have inspections. Renee was usually in the kitchen when he walked in, at the island with her phone or at the stove, and they moved through the early evening the way couples do when a marriage has found its routine, which is to say without thinking about it, which is also to say without looking at it closely. She was wearing a blouse he hadn't seen before the night he noticed the bag, deep plum, with a sheen to it, not from anywhere she had mentioned. The bag hung from the chair in the corner of the kitchen, structured tan leather, brass clasp. And Marcus noticed it the way he noticed everything, which was completely and without comment. He had stopped asking about things like that 6 months earlier. The explanations had begun arriving a half-second behind the question. A sample sale. A friend's gift she was keeping for a moment. A bonus she hadn't gotten around to mentioning. He had believed each one because it had been easier, and because Marcus was the kind of man who measured twice and had assumed, without verifying, that the people he built things with were doing the same. There had been other signals. A new perfume on the bathroom counter in October, smaller and darker than her usual. A French name he couldn't read pressed into the glass. He had set it back without comment. A deleted search history on the shared tablet he had found by accident one Sunday while pulling up a contractor's invoice. He had noted it. He had not investigated. He noted things the way he noted the 2 millimeter discrepancy in the bearing plate, as facts requiring a longer look than the current moment allowed. He did not sleep well in October. Not poorly, Marcus slept with the baseline solidity of a structure built to code. But there was an alertness beneath the surface that was new. The awareness of load accumulating somewhere it was not supposed to. His mother called on a Thursday afternoon while he was on site. He called her back from the truck at lunch. "You sound tired," she said. "I'm fine," he said. "You sound like your father when he was working something out," she said. He didn't say anything to that. "Sunday dinner," she said. "There will be cornbread." He said he would be there. That Sunday, he sat at her kitchen table with a plate he didn't finish and told her what he had been watching for 2 months. She listened with both hands around her coffee cup and the porch light on outside even though it was afternoon, the way she always left it when she expected someone who needed to arrive slowly. When he finished, she said, "Has she made any move yet? Asked for anything?" He said no. "Then she's still planning," she said. She looked at him the way she looked at him when what she was about to say needed to stay with him. "Move carefully," she said. "And move completely." He almost didn't pick up the phone. It was a Tuesday, the second week of November, and he had come downstairs at 5:40 to find Renee's phone on the kitchen counter face up, the alarm she had set blinking its warning. He reached across to dismiss it before it woke her. His thumb crossed the screen. A message thread was already open. He had not looked for it. It was there. The contact was saved as G. The last message had arrived at 11:52 the previous night. He read it once. 3 more days, and the account's yours. He won't know until he lands. Marcus stood at the counter with the phone in his hands. His breathing did not change. He scrolled upward with the careful, deliberate movement of a man reviewing a structural report, looking for the seam, not just the surface. There were 47 messages in the thread. He read 23. Renee had been planning the transfer for 6 weeks. The joint savings account, $287,400, 12 years of Marcus's direct deposits, quarterly bonuses, and an untouched settlement from a project dispute 2 years prior, was the target. She had the routing number for a receiving account he had never seen. She had built the timeline around his travel calendar, a project inspection in Memphis he was scheduled to leave for that Friday morning. One message from G said, "He trusts you completely." That's what makes this clean. Renee's response, "That's the thing about men like Marcus. They're too honest to imagine anyone else isn't." And from 3 weeks before that, from G, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Renee, "I've been sure for 8 months. I just needed the right window." Marcus set the phone back on the counter exactly as it had been, face up, angled slightly toward the refrigerator. He poured his coffee. He screwed the lid on his thermos. He checked his jacket pocket for the notebook. He walked out to the truck. He sat in the driveway with the engine off for 3 minutes. Then he started it and pulled onto the street. He called his college roommate Isaiah from the highway at 6:04, hands free, voice flat and measured. Isaiah answered on the second ring. Marcus told him everything, every message, every name, every figure. The way he described a structural discrepancy to a project team. Factual, unembellished, without filler. When he finished, Isaiah was quiet for 4 seconds. Then Isaiah said, "I know an attorney. Her name was Diana Pierce. Her office was on the 14th floor downtown with river-facing windows and a wall behind her desk holding 2 framed degrees, Spelman for undergraduate, Georgetown for law, and a photograph of her with a judge whose name Marcus recognized from the local paper. She had been practicing family law for 19 years. She had handled marital asset fraud 3 times in the preceding 2 years, 2 of them with favorable judgments on record. She read the screenshots Marcus had transferred to his own phone in the driveway that morning. All 23 messages, time-stamped, sender intact. She read without expression. When she was done, she set the phone on her desk, folded her hands, and looked at him. "When does she plan to execute the transfer?" "Friday," Marcus said. "I leave for Memphis at 7 a.m. "You're not going to Memphis," Diana Pierce said. "And the money will not be in that account when she looks." She walked him through what needed to happen in the next 48 hours without hesitation. He listened without interrupting and without writing anything down. He did not need to write it down. She told him to move the funds to a single name account before Friday. She told him to retain a forensic accountant to examine all shared financial records for prior undisclosed transfers. She told him to authorize a document preservation hold from the joint bank and to authorize her to file the divorce petition first, before Renee could establish the opening narrative. "She's had an attorney since July," Marcus said. Diana Pierce said. "She walked in with a strategy. We're going to walk in with a better one." She looked at him steadily across the desk. "I've been doing this for 19 years, she said. "What you've handed me today is the most clearly documented case of premeditated marital asset fraud I have ever walked into. We have every single thing we need." Marcus moved the funds on Wednesday evening. He sat at the desk in his home office. Door closed. The house quiet. Renee asleep at the end of the hall. He transferred $287,400 to a personal account at a credit union he had been a member of since 2003, opened with a $70 deposit that had sat nearly dormant for 11 years. He left $312 in the joint account. He came to bed at 10:40. He lay on his back and listened to the house and thought about the Kelton Bridge, the load testing scheduled for March, the eastern pylon, the 2 millimeters that had been wrong for 6 years before anyone stood in the right place to see it. Thursday was ordinary. He ran the morning meeting. He wrote in his notebook. He drove home. He made dinner because Renee was on a call in the bedroom with the door closed. He watched 40 minutes of a documentary about oceanographic survey equipment and went to sleep. What Renee did in those last days while Marcus moved quietly through the ordinary architecture of their shared life was begin living in the future she had planned. She made a reservation she mentioned to no one at a hotel in a city they had never discussed visiting together. She bought something new and offered no explanation for it. She had stopped, at some point in those final days, asking how the Kelton project was going, not because she had never asked, but because she had decided she would not need to know for much longer. She told G. 2 more days. He has no idea. Friday morning, Marcus did not go to Memphis. He told Renee before she was fully awake that the inspection had been rescheduled, a weather delay. He would know more by noon. She nodded, with her eyes half closed, and turned over. He went downstairs and called Isaiah, and sat on the back porch steps in the early cold dark. Isaiah asked how he was doing. Marcus thought about it for a moment. "I feel like I'm waiting on a concrete pour," he said. "Everything is mixed. Everything is positioned. You just can't rush what happens next." Isaiah said he was coming over. Marcus said no. He meant it. At 9:47 a.m., his phone buzzed with a transaction notification from the joint account. Transfer attempted, $287,400. Account balance at time of attempt, $312. DO 0. Transaction declined. Insufficient funds. He read it once. He set the phone down. He looked out the kitchen window at the yard, bare, gray, the flat November light settling over everything, and watched a bird land on the back fence post and stay there for a moment without moving, and then leave. He did not go upstairs. At 11:15, Renee came downstairs with her suitcase. She was dressed carefully. The plum blouse. Shoes he had not seen before. Her hair set. The tan leather bag on her shoulder, and a second bag he had never seen in her other hand. She came into the kitchen and stopped when she saw him standing at the counter. Her face did something complicated. "The Memphis trip got pushed," Marcus said. She said nothing. "The account's been empty for 3 days," he said. The silence that followed lasted 6 seconds. He counted them the way he counted the seconds a structure takes to respond to a test load, waiting to see what moved and how far. She said, "I want a divorce." He said, "I know." She left 20 minutes later in a silver Audi that had been parked 2 streets over. He stood at the front window and watched it clear the block. Then he went back to the kitchen and picked up his phone. Diana Pierce answered on the first ring. "She's gone," Marcus said. "Good," Diana Pierce said. "We filed at 9 this morning." She was served at 9:48. Diana Pierce had filed the divorce petition while the transfer was still processing its decline. The paperwork reached Renee's attorney, a man named Holloway, who had been holding the file since July, 3 months before Marcus found the messages on the kitchen counter, before Renee had crossed the city limits. The petition cited marital waste, fraud, and concealed assets. It came with 47 pages of supporting documentation Marcus had assembled in a single overnight session earlier that week. 4 years of shared bank statements, the full message thread with timestamps, a chronological timeline prepared by Diana Pierce, and a sworn affidavit from Marcus describing every step from discovery forward. The forensic accountant Diana retained was named Audrey Grant. She had spent 12 years as a federal bank examiner before going private, and she carried the particular demeanor of someone who has found enough discrepancies that individual ones no longer produce surprise. She went through 6 years of shared financial records in 11 working days. What she found, beginning in January of the prior year, 22 months before the failed transfer, Renee had made 41 cash withdrawals from the joint checking account, each one structured to fall below the automated reporting threshold. 41 withdrawals over 22 months. The total was $68,200. The money had been deposited into a personal savings account at a credit union Audrey located in a tax document from 4 years earlier, an account Renee had never disclosed in any financial affidavit. Audrey also found a second transfer. In April, $19,000 had been moved from a joint investment account to the same personal account. The joint investment account had been established with Renee listed as a secondary signatory, a clerical error neither Marcus nor the bank had caught when the account was opened. She had executed the transfer on a Tuesday at 9:11 a.m. Marcus's calendar for that Tuesday showed him in the Thornbridge conference room for a project review session starting at 9. The combined total she had moved, or attempted to move, $374,600. Marcus had protected $287,400 by moving it first. Audrey Grant's work documented the rest. The man Renee had left with was named Garrett Hull. He was 44 years old and worked as an investment manager at a downtown wealth firm. His presentation was precise in the way that certain kinds of debt produces precision: the downtown apartment, the silver Audi, the restaurants. The watch Marcus had seen on his wrist in a photograph Renee's colleague had posted without thinking about it. Diana Pierce authorized a private investigator named Terrence Moore, who worked out of an office above a dry cleaner on Delmar Boulevard, to develop a complete financial profile. What Terrence found in 9 days, using public records and court filings, Garrett Hull had not filed a personal income tax return in 22 months. He carried $81,000 in credit card debt across 4 accounts. He was 4 months behind on the lease for the downtown apartment. The lease was not in Garrett's name. It was held through a leasing LLC, and the subletter listed in the original lease documents was not Renee Webb. Renee had gone to Garrett's apartment the week she left, with her 2 bags. She had stood in the hallway for 22 minutes before calling a friend who answered. In early December, Holloway sent a formal demand letter on Renee's behalf. The letter argued that Marcus had unilaterally transferred marital funds without consent, which it characterized as a coercive financial act. It requested that the $287,400 be placed in jointly controlled escrow, pending the proceedings. It further claimed that Renee's personal credit union account represented savings she had accumulated independently from prior employment and was not subject to equitable division. Diana Pierce's response was 22 pages. It documented, in chronological order, the discovery of the planned transfer, the complete 47-message thread with timestamps, the 11-month timeline of communications between Renee and Garrett Hull, Audrey Grant's complete forensic accounting report on the personal credit union account and the April investment transfer, and the relevant citations from the state's marital fraud statute that Diana Pierce had cited successfully in this courthouse twice before. The letter concluded by noting that Marcus had not secreted assets. He had protected documented marital funds from a premeditated theft his wife had planned, in her own recorded words, for 8 months. The claim that those funds were manipulatively moved was not supported by the evidence. The evidence was her own messages. Holloway did not respond for 11 days. While he waited, Renee was living in an extended stay suite off the highway. She was not at Garrett's apartment. Terrence Moore confirmed that by the second week of December, Garrett had not answered her calls in 6 days. He had taken a trip in December to a destination Terrence noted without further commentary. He had sent one text in response to 3 of Renee's. Tied up. Talk soon. That was the last documented communication. Isaiah came for dinner on a Wednesday in December, and they sat at the kitchen table with the television off. They talked about the Kelton load testing and about Isaiah's daughter's strong opinions about breakfast foods. After a while, Isaiah mentioned that Renee had posted photographs, she and Garrett at a restaurant, on a boat, at a resort. Marcus said he had seen them. Isaiah said, "And it doesn't, no," Marcus said. "She can go wherever she wants. The documentation doesn't change because she's on a boat." Isaiah shook his head slowly. "You are the calmest man I have ever known in a crisis." "It's a process," Marcus said, "not a crisis." Isaiah said, "Your wife tried to take almost $300,000 from you." "Almost," Marcus said. "She got 312. Isaiah laughed once, hard, and then stopped himself, and then they were both quiet for a moment. And then they talked about something else. In January, Garrett Hull's financial situation became a matter of public record through a civil debt suit filed by his primary credit card issuer, $81,000 in default, plus compounding interest, filed at the same courthouse where Diana Pierce had registered the divorce petition 6 weeks prior. His name appeared alongside his employer's name in the filing. His employer was a wealth management firm. The details were available to anyone who looked for them. Marcus read the filing on a Tuesday evening at the kitchen desk. He sat with it for a moment. Then he closed the laptop and went to make dinner. He went to his mother's that Sunday. She had the coffee ready and the porch light on, and she looked at him across her kitchen table and said, "You're holding up." "Yes," he said. "She never asked," his mother said. "Not once in 13 years did that woman ask what your father left you, what the credit union held, what any of it was actually worth. She built a picture of who you were from the outside, and she lived inside that picture, and she never once thought to check whether it was right." Marcus was quiet. "That's not your fault," his mother said. "That's hers." He drove home in the dark, the F-250 holding steady on the empty highway, and he thought about the picture Renee had built. The Carhartt jacket, the thermos, the cracked mirror, the used truck, and he thought about how every detail of that picture was accurate, and how completely wrong it had been about what those details added up to. She had looked at the surface and called it the foundation. She had never gone down into the water to look. The settlement conference was held on a Wednesday in January on the 9th floor of a building, 3 blocks from the courthouse. The conference room had a long pale wood table, 12 chairs, windows facing a parking structure, and a ventilation system running quietly behind the walls, steady, almost inaudible, present if the room was still enough. Marcus arrived at 8:45 for a 9 o'clock meeting. He wore a charcoal suit, white shirt, and a tie his mother had given him for his 38th birthday. He carried his leather portfolio with the materials organized in the sequence Diana Pierce had specified. He helped the paralegal set the room before anyone else arrived. Renee came in at 9:03 with Holloway and a junior associate carrying a second bag. She was in a dark blue blazer, her expression maintained in the particular way of someone who has been doing the work of composure for weeks. She sat across from Marcus. She looked at the table. Holloway opened for their side. His argument, the $287,400, was marital property Marcus had moved without consent. The personal credit union account reflected independent savings Renee was entitled to retain. Her new relationship was not legally material to equitable distribution. He spoke for 9 minutes. He made it sound orderly. Diana Pierce let him finish. Then she placed 5 documents in the center of the table. The first was the complete 47-message thread. Printed, time-stamped, the contact G identified at the header. The second was Audrey Grant's forensic report, 87 pages, tabbed, every transaction annotated with date, amount, and receiving account. The third was the joint savings transaction record, the November 1st balance, the November 13th transfer, the failed November 16th attempt timestamped at 9:47 a.m. The fourth documented the personal credit union account, $68,200, 41 structured withdrawals, 22 months. The fifth documented the April investment transfer, $19,000, Tuesday at 9:11 a.m., Marcus's calendar confirming his location in conference that morning. Diana Pierce said, "Your client attempted to transfer $287,400 on November 16th at 9:47 a.m. On the date she told her partners she would execute the transfer, and a plan documented across 47 messages, in her own words, over 6 weeks. The funds were not present because Mr. Webb moved them 11 days prior upon discovering those messages. He did not conceal assets. He protected documented marital funds from an imminent, premeditated theft. Those funds are fully accounted for in our filing." She did not raise her voice. "Your client's personal credit union account, not disclosed in the financial affidavit, contains $68,200 drawn from the marital checking account in structured increments over 22 months. The April transfer of $19,000 from a jointly held account your client accessed without authorization completes the record." The junior associate beside Holloway had stopped writing. Renee's hands were flat on the table. Her face had lost the composed expression, not suddenly, but the way a structure loses alignment, gradually from within, before anything visible on the outside shifts. Marcus said, "I'd like to say one thing." Diana Pierce looked at him. She nodded once. He looked across the table at Renee. He said, "I never hid a single thing from you. For 13 years you knew exactly what I earned and where it went. I put everything I had into that account and into that house and into that life because I believed we were building it together. You watched me do it. And then you spent 8 months planning to take it while I made dinner and sat next to you and thought we were still going somewhere." Renee looked at the table. He said, "You decided what kind of man I was before you ever thought to ask what else there might be. $312. That's what you thought you were leaving me. That's what you thought I was worth to outwit." He closed the portfolio. He squared it with the edge of the table. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the door. Diana Pierce looked at Holloway. "We'll give you 10 minutes, she said. Marcus did not go back into the room. The settlement was finalized in February. Renee received no portion of the $287,400, reclassified under the fraud documentation as protected marital funds lawfully secured before the attempted transfer. She was required to return the $68,200 from the personal credit union account to the marital estate. She was required to return the $19,000 from the investment account transfer. She was assessed 60% of the combined legal fees, totaling $41,300. Her attorney filed no appeal. From the account she had spent 22 months carefully filling, $0 retained. From the transfer she had built 8 months of planning around, $312 received. Garrett Hull had not been in contact with her since December. The civil debt filing was public record by January. The downtown apartment was vacated by February. The lease had lapsed and the leasing LLC had released it. The silver Audi had been returned weeks prior. It had not been his to keep. It had never been his to keep. Renee was living in a 2-bedroom rental 40 minutes from the house by the time the settlement was signed. $1,900 a month. She had gone back to work in February at a logistics company, entry-level coordinator, $41,000 a year. Her previous employer had filled her position in 3 weeks. Her former colleagues knew the shape of what had happened through the channel by which these things travel in professional circles. No one had reached out. Her sister had called once in January. Her mother twice. By February, neither had called again. The antique clock she had taken from the house when she left, the one Marcus had found at an estate sale and cleaned himself and set running, the one that had sat on the living room mantel for 4 years, had stopped somewhere during the move. She had not wound it since. There was a night in February when she lay in her apartment in the quiet of a place that had no accumulated history and stared at the ceiling and tried to remember if she had ever, once in 13 years, asked Marcus what his father had left him, what the credit union held, what the numbers actually were behind the Carhartt jacket and the used truck and the thermos and the ordinary, unremarkable, steady life she had looked at and decided she was done with. She could not remember asking. The question had never once crossed her mind. She had built a picture. She had lived inside that picture. She had never thought to check if it was real. That thought settled into her chest like something cold and heavy, and entirely too late. Marcus sanded the dining room floor on a Saturday in the 3rd week of February. The floor was original hardwood from 1962, and the finish had gone flat near the entry, worn down over years of footsteps and holiday gatherings and the daily movement of a life. He rented the sander on a Friday afternoon, ran the rough pass in 3 hours and the finish pass in 2, and applied the first coat of polyurethane by early evening. He opened the back windows and sat on the porch steps while it dried. The night was cold. He had a cup of coffee that had gone slightly cool, and he sat with it and watched the dark yard and did not check his phone. His mother came for dinner on Sunday. She brought cornbread. She stood at the edge of the dining room and looked at the floor for a moment. "Looks like the day it was laid," she said. He said, "Close." She said, "Closer than anyone else would have gotten it." He and Isaiah had dinner at a diner they had been going to since they were 26. Isaiah ordered the patty melt. Marcus ordered the grilled chicken. They talked about the Kelton load testing. Scheduled for March, the Eastern Pylon form had come out clean, which Marcus had expected, and about Isaiah's daughter's strong opinions about breakfast foods, and about a documentary Marcus had been watching about deep-sea survey engineering that Isaiah called boring, and Marcus called the opposite of boring. They did not talk about Renee. There was nothing left to say about her that the documents had not already said more precisely. He replaced the cracked mirror on the F-250 on a Sunday in March. $63 for the part, 2 hours of his time. He fitted the new glass in, checked the angle from the driver's seat, adjusted it a half degree, and checked it again. The following Monday morning, the alarm went off at 5:12 a.m. He reached across and silenced it before the second ring. He lay still for 4 seconds. He listened to the house settle. It was quiet. It had been quiet for a while now, not empty, not hollow, just quiet. The difference between a house that is resting and a house that has been abandoned. He had built enough structures to know the difference without needing to look. He was out of bed by 5:15. He filled his thermos from the pot he had set the night before. He took his Carhartt jacket from the hook beside the door. He checked the inside left pocket for his notebook. He walked out to the truck. He pulled out of the driveway at 5:24 a.m. The new mirror showed the street behind him with total clarity, all the way to the corner where the street lamp bent the light. He reached the Kelton site at 5:51. The bridge stood in the early morning gray exactly as he had engineered it to stand, measured, aligned, constructed to hold whatever load was asked of it. He climbed down from the truck, patted his jacket pocket for the notebook, and walked toward the structure from the south end. His boots on the packed earth, his eyes on the work ahead, his name on every document that mattered, exactly where it had always been, exactly where it belonged. He walked the full length from south to north and stood at the north end and looked at what he had built. Then he opened his notebook to a clean page and got to work. He did not look back. He was exactly where 13 years of building had been pointing him, and there was still more work to do. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.